This is Greg Harmon at Deceleration, deceleration.news. We're talking with Bill Barker about cities, urban heat, and strategies to save lives. Stick around. We'll take good care of you.
My first job out of school, I graduated with my bachelor's degree is in physics, and I went to work for NASA in Houston
Mm-hmm.
and worked on, did my part of putting a man on the moon.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing that there's a lot of parallels here in that we now live in a climate we've never lived in before.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me of going to the moon, which we'd never done before.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to do that was to rely heavily on science and engineering and to do experiments and things to test out to make sure.
But we're
Uh,
shredding the NASA libraries as we speak, right? The Johnson Space Center library, or what was?
well, that's another story. But
Yeah,
what I'm getting to is that I realize that I with this extreme heat issue, we need to get back and look at the science, and in particular thermodynamics.
right.
And I've come to appreciate that not everybody that's working on this has ever studied thermodynamics.
Sure.
And that's where we talk about the first law of thermodynamics is that energy is neither created nor
Or
destroyed,
destroyed.
and heat is a form of energy. So the the key, I think, from my perspective anyway, in looking at trying to reduce heat in a city, is to think about what you do with the heat.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
it's it's not created or destroyed. You can transfer it into something else, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Hmm.
For example, I saw an analogy. It's kind of like wrapping paper on a present.
Hmm.
You can take it off, uh, and it's not on the present anymore, but it's there. It's
Hmm.
a crumpled up wrapping paper.
Hmm.
Same thing with heat. If you like have a put a shiny surface on things and chase the heat away, it's still there.
Right.
And so we need to think about putting the heat someplace or transferring it
Hmm.
into another form, uh, and not just make everything bright and shiny.
Well, one of the reasons people are so grateful, again, for our oceans, which we continue to treat with great reverence universally. Um, I'm joking, of course, but that the oceans have absorbed so much of the emissions responsible for global heat and the heat, right, that we're putting out, and
Yeah.
running out of room. But I think the last research I saw was due to there's some relationship with microplastics that's impacting the ability of the
Uh,
oceans to absorb more of that carbon dioxide. But just by background, so right, we're talking about roots in studying physics, and but I want to introduce you quickly, just also as in San Antonio, we know you from your work at VIA, the Transportation Authority. As an executive director and at Solar San Antonio in the early years, a professor at UTSA, I think ongoing today, and
no,
also,
not
oh, not
anymore.
today. Okay. And
I do a lecture every once in a while, but I'm not
okay,
a.
adjunct. Okay.
Yeah.
And also as director for the Great Springs Project, which is a conservation effort to link the green spaces and waterways kind of between the headwaters of many of these sacred springs to the north down through San Antonio. Is that
And I'm the director of regional transportation planning. I'm not the executive director.
okay for
Harry
that
Merritt
project?
is doing a great job on that.
Great.
And also, I was the project manager in the Office of Sustainability, and I
Correct.
actually retired from the city
Right.
from
So a broad, pretty comprehensive view of many of these interlocking challenges of extreme heat, climate, you know, disruption, the lived human experience, and then the city planning component of that. So I'm really happy to be talking with you again. And I know you gave a presentation recently to the local Sierra Club. I'd hope to attend and to record and broadcast, but I've got you now. So yeah, let's take up where you were drifting off before I interrupted you.
well, so I showed the Sierra Club my what I call my thought journey,
Mhm.
and I used a photo that you took out in front of City Hall about constituents showing up and complaining about the heat.
Yeah.
And I, so I asked myself, well, how hot is it?
Mhm.
Uh, when is it too hot? And what can be done to bring it down and make it more healthy and comfortable?
Mhm.
And so I go on to say that the Earth is hotter than it's ever been in the
Mhm.
last 120,000 years.
So modern human experience on the planet.
Exactly. The last
Mhm.
3 years are the hottest years ever. And so since civilization began, humans have never experienced a hotter climate than it is now.
Mhm.
Now that's globally.
Mhm.
Locally, San Antonio is perennially on the list of the top hottest cities in the United States.
Mhm.
And I was looking at the forecasts that the International Panel on Climate Change put out. There's actually it gets down to the county level, and I looked at Bear County, and I've in my presentation I've got the low and high estimates of the number of 100-degree days expected here in Bear County, and high or low, they're both going up
Mhm.
over the years ahead, the decades ahead. And I also put on there the actual number of 100-degree days we've had in the last few years. And uh, we're, it's amazing how we seem to be ahead of schedule on the number of 100-degree days.
Now
And then
let
go
me ask
ahead.
you, just to interrupt real quick, because I'm looking ahead, I'm thinking about this conversation, and I know there's kind of two that people have been having for the last 10, 20, 30 years. Um, Things are getting hotter, storms are getting stronger, and therefore, right? And then there's a therefore. What do we do? Um, and we frequently break that down as adaptation, preparing people for more extreme weather, more extreme heat, trying to soften the harms, right? Dampen the harms, improve people's lives, hopefully at the same time. But then the mitigation side, we've got to stop filling the bathtub with water before it all overflows, like filling the atmosphere with heat trapping gases. Your presentation, I think, is heavily on the adaptation side. There's been,
Right.
I think, a lot of people are kind of g- looking at our condition under this current regime as almost a lost cause in terms of shutting down the power plant, coal plants, all this kind of stuff. We're ramping up data centers, or ramping up, insisting by federal, decree, we keep the coal plants burning. Um, Let me just ask you before we get into the adaptation measures, which have to happen, um, just to help people survive, right? And we've been writing, like you said, that the slide about the showing up at city council, what we're demanding was that the city and the county start counting the number of people being killed by extreme heat. And that's something that we don't do, and it's not done in many parts of the state, in spite of this extreme heat and rising heat. What are your thoughts just broadly, I don't want to just rail this, and I want to get on with your key observations because I know what we're in for, and I think you've done really excellent research in terms of the mitigation side and trying to, whether it's in terms of, runaway warming scenarios or that, where are you just emotionally and mentally with the big picture on this?
Well, when I was with the city in the Office of Sustainability, our focus was on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and I was the token transportation guy there in the office, and was working on electric vehicles. I got the a city ordinance changed where neighborhood electric vehicles had been banned from the city, et cetera. We were trying to uh, reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from transportation and other sources, and that's a struggle. Uh, it seems to me, I could be wrong, but the last statistics I've seen, the emissions continue to go up, even in San Antonio, and globally, there's some changes being made, but it's going to, if, as I understand it, if all greenhouse gas emissions were stopped worldwide today, it would be decades before we saw any cooling start to happen. Uh, Probably it might even be into the next century.
I think
Uh,
Michael Mann has taken that on that point. I think so that research maybe is in dispute on how long it would take, but definitely the trajectory we're on right now. I think, without the constraints of policy is kind of like where we've gone, or policy being put towards stoking more emissions. It does seem like it's not, when we say our lifetimes, it's not probably my children's lifetime, unless there's like, and I want to leave space for this radical global resistance and demand of, an alternative path forward. So I think that's still possible, but we're definitely in a technical conundrum, and
and
looking
and
at
uh, and
mass
and
human suffering.
I
Yeah.
think we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions for sure, and
Hmm.
we need to be working on that. But what I've come to appreciate, Greg, and I think you do, is that it's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter, and we need to deal with that because I've gone around and I've talked to people around the city who have different responsibilities, and I get basically three answers. One is, of course, it's hot. It's Texas. It's summer. And what they don't realize, it's hotter than it's ever been, and it's dangerously hot.
This is not your parents' Texas heat. This is not your grandparents' Texas heat. This is stop with this. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Or I get it's not my problem, or I get yeah, I agree with you, but I don't know what to do. And that's what got me digging into, well, what do we do?
Yeah, I really
Um,
appreciate that about. So let's move back over to your to
so
your key point here. Yeah, thank you.
okay, so I put up a slide there that where I point out that well, one of the things that I heard a lot was we need more shade. And uh, so part of my presentation is about that's not enough. Uh, so I start with the fact that the our official temperature, which is measured at the airport, is taken in the shade. So when it's 100 degrees in San Antonio officially, that's in the shade.
Hmm.
And it turns out that the airport is actually in a relatively cool part of town. It's surrounded by a grassy field, you know.
Far out of the city center where all the density and
Yeah, there you
concrete.
go. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's away from a lot of big buildings and all that. And so it's a relatively cool spot. Well, what makes what makes different parts of the city hotter than other parts of the city? And I got a pie chart that shows the two biggies. The biggest one is a lack of vegetation.
Hmm.
a part of town that lacks vegetation, and typically this goes along with the relative income of that neighborhood.
Hmm.
Um, but that's the biggest one is the lack of vegetation, and our tree cover has actually been going down, even though there's lots of good people who are busy planting trees all the time. They'll be the first to tell you that this drought doesn't
Right,
help.
right.
The fact that San Antonio doesn't have a lot of extra water around, the fact that it takes effort to water the trees if you're going to plant them, et cetera. And even though people are trying to increase tree cover, it's not happening.
Hmm.
Let's keep that in mind that the number one thing is a lack of vegetation. Vegetation, as you probably know, the neat thing about it, not only does it provide shade if it's trees, but it's also taking moisture from the ground and
Hmm.
through transpiration, evapotranspiration, I guess it's called in the case of a tree, it's actually cooling. It's
Yeah,
using the cooling effect of the water evaporating.
they're air conditioners. I mean, they have a
Yeah.
right capacity essentially.
Right. And then the second biggest item is dark heat absorbing surfaces. Think of
Hmm.
parking lots,
Hmm.
asphalt parking lots. Greg, those two together account for more than half of
Yeah.
uh, the heat differences we see around town. So let's keep that in mind. Then I got a chart, and you don't see this very often. I haven't seen this at all from anybody. I actually went around the city in past summers and measured the heat of various surfaces
Yeah.
around town. And you might not be surprised that the hottest thing I ran across was an asphalt street,
Hmm.
which gets so hot that if you if you touch it, it will instantly destroy your skin. And
Hmm.
I read an article from Phoenix.
Hmm.
A third of the burn unit beds were being occupied by people who'd simply fallen down in
Yeah.
Phoenix
Yeah.
on the ground, and they were there because they had to have skin grafts.
Hmm.
And you're in the hospital for an average of 16 days if that happens. So not only are they hot, these asphalt surfaces, and adding to the heat, the air
Hmm.
temperature, but
Radiating, holding it
dangerous.
and pushing it back out in later into
Right.
the day or night. Yeah.
They absorb it when the sun's out, and then they re-emit it all day long and into the evening.
Right.
But they not only do that, but they are a health hazard.
Hmm.
In fact, that if you fall on them, you can actually burn yourself
I'm just
pretty.
looking at this one here. You have the official city temp was 103. The street to touch it is 162.
Yes.
Extreme. Yeah.
Yeah. And the research I found at 156 degrees, your skin is destroyed
Yeah.
immediately. And then there's things like I measured the handlebars of a scooter sitting out on the sidewalk, and
Hmm.
it was hot enough it was at 134 degrees,
Yeah.
which will cause second degree burns. So suggesting that one of the things we need to think about is that with these scooters, have places where you can park them in the shade. Because the shade does help to keep them from getting so hot. That's true for all of these things. Um, uh, then I talk about how it's not all about air temperature. Heat stress comes from not only direct radiation from the sun, but the warm things around us, like these asphalt streets and buildings and everything, and even other people. Uh, 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 we get bombarded with heat, and there's a mean radiant temperature number that is the one that seems to be the most important when you're talking about somebody's physical health. And So that's something to keep in mind that there's more going on than than just the air temperature. And the radiation is not just from the sun, but it's from other things.
I know you
Um,
talk about humidity as well, and that's something that I think folks don't appreciate that when it comes to public health and people showing up in hospitals, people, I mean, heart attacks, all kinds of things that people are dying from due to heat, heat-related deaths. There's also this interplay between rising temperatures and rising humidity in Texas. So it's not our parents' heat here, but neither is it the humidity that they had. And those two things together, I know you're as part of your presentation, but are highly hazardous.
so I found out there are literally at least 50 different ways to measure human heat stress. And in my presentation, I focus and I have a slide that just covers three of them that the National Weather Service has been dealing with. One is, as you point out, is the heat index, which is a combination of the air temperature and the relative humidity. And incidentally, that's a measure that's in the shade. And you're absolutely right that summertime here, it is hot enough and humid enough to where you're in the danger zone with the heat index right off the bat. And that's in the shade. Okay. And then the second one I talk about is the wet bulb globe temperature, which is something developed by the military because they were having troubles back in the 50s with soldiers in training were having heat illnesses, and they were correlated the climate conditions with these, and it's a combination of the radiation that we talked about, the air temperature, the humidity, and the wind. There's such a thing as a cool breeze, right?
Right.
And that's another measure that actually you can. I've got a wet bulb globe temperature meter. I kept reading
Yeah.
about it. I went out. I started taking measurements around town with that. It also measures some of these other things.
Yeah, I have the setting on one of my devices as well that will do wet bulb, and I did meet on one of my presentations on heat here in San Antonio a couple years ago, a woman who came up to me afterward, pulled out of her wallet a heat um, survival recommendation card, a business card size thing from her time as an officer at Joint Base San Antonio in the 70s. She had been
Yes.
carrying it this whole time. It was like how to live in heat. And I was pretty impressed by that, and I'm wondering where those cards are for the rest of us.
I handed those out at the not as cards, but by 8.5 by 11s at the Sierra Club, and I'll send you one because it does show you how to deal with how much water to have on hand, etc. With that, I'll send that to you. Uh, yeah, and I went out to UTSA. As I understand it, UTSA is pursuing this Nueva Nueva project along Nueva Street, trying to make it a cool corridor. And they've been talking to SAWS about tapping benches and things into the cooling district that SAWS runs and trying to take advantage of that and maybe some other things to create a cool corridor east-west through downtown, which would help connect university assets in downtown. And I went out to see the work that was being done there, and I start talking about the wet bulb globe temperature. And
Mhm.
this one male student made the connection. Hey, he was in the military, and they would have different colored flags to indicate what level of activity to take place. And he didn't know that that was the wet bulb globe temperature based flag system that the military uses. I tried to get some flags for an inner city school that was interested in environmental issues, but apparently they literally don't use flags anymore at Fort Sam. They have it's all it's on your phone, it's on your website or whatever. They do it that way now. And then the last measure that I talk about from the Weather Service is something they just came up with in 2024, did it nationally for the first time in 2024, called heat risk. And they correlated, and this relates back to what you were talking about earlier about the residents concerned about keeping track of heat-related deaths. What they've done is correlated uh, emergency room admissions related to heat illnesses with the climate conditions and also the mortality figures. And basically, the hotter it is, the more mortality you see, the more emergency room admissions related to heat issues you see. And they've actually got a an index they've developed for that. That's something that you cannot go out and measure yourself because the National Weather Service considers whether it's an unusually hot day, or is this sort of a normal day for San Antonio, let's say. Uh, those kinds of things. It's a pretty sophisticated approach, but they will tell you what the heat risk is. You have to go to their website, and they will tell you what the heat risk is, and also what it's expected to be for the next few days. And the idea is that that will be useful for people that have to plan on the heat situation. Like, as you know, we have San Antonio and other cities have cooling centers, they open up and so on. And it's useful that for them to know in advance when it's going to be cool or hot, I'm sorry. Uh, the next chart in my presentation shows me with my wet bulb globe temperature meter going around town, and I I had a discussion with somebody, um, a very knowledgeable person who was once with the River Authority, and I was asking him, can we tap into the flood tunnel that goes underneath downtown San Antonio? It's got to be cool down there. It's like 150 feet down. It's got to be cooler. Is there a way to tap into that? In Paris, they tap into the catacombs, for example, and pull the cool air out of there to cool benches and things. And I was told, oh, Bill, if you go downtown and stand next to the river in the shade of the trees, you'll be fine.
Hmm.
Well, there's a picture of me or my wet bulb globe temperature next to the river in the shade of the trees. And the official temperature at the airport is 99 degrees at the
Hmm.
time. The temperature where I was standing was 106 degrees, and it was the wet bulb, the heat index, and the wet bulb globe temperature said you're in trouble,
Yeah. Yeah.
health wise in that situation. And I've got some other pictures that show uh, those measurements in other places.
So I think what you're demonstrating is it's not that the river, the water, the green space along the river walk through downtown isn't performing a function of cooling, but the extreme temperature is such that even in this spaces, it's not like left to its like our own devices with what we have today, is not sufficient. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes, no, that's why I keep talking about how we need active cooling. It's not going to be enough to be in the shade because 100 degrees, people start to have health problems with typical um, humidity levels. They start to have health problems starting at about 85 degrees. And of course, people are very different. Some people are going to have problems, others aren't. But if you want to just pick a temperature, things start happening at 85 degrees, and the hotter it gets, the worse it gets. Okay. And yeah. And one of the things that I talk about next is about hydration. Uh, in order to stay healthy in these very hot temperatures, you need to have access to water, to drinking water. And it turns out, uh, on average, in the United States, there's like 5 public drinking fountains for every 100,000 people. Uh,
This is U.S. cities.
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
This is uh, and it shows that San Antonio's below average,
Hmm.
and Austin actually has 3 times as many public drinking fountains per capita as we do,
Yeah.
and Houston lags even further but behind. But this is something to think about. Is we're actually kind of behind the curve on having uh, a reasonable number of public drinking fountains.
Hmm.
And the thing about these drinking fountains is they help people from getting dangerously dehydrated. They you can appreciate that these work for everybody. You don't have to be a wealthy tourist. You could be a homeless person here in San Antonio. All these people need water to stay healthy when it's very hot. Um, and if you have those uh, kind of fountains that refill bottles, that
Hmm.
helps cut down a lot on the plastic waste. In Tyler, Texas, this one woman noticed that workers using the bus in the afternoon, they had used up all the water they had carried with them. And she's got this nonprofit that puts out plastic water bottles in coolers,
Hmm.
ice in them, that are chained to the bus shelters in the afternoon. And I'm thinking, well, that's nice, except you're going to end up with a lot of plastic bottles all over everywhere.
Hmm.
A better way to do it, we have one of these fountains that refills a water bottle.
Hmm.
Uh,
And even I see this Phoenix offering a chilled water, so you fill up your
ah,
water, it's not, 90-degree water, it's actually chilled water. So
yes, yes, and that's an interesting little case study. They've got a real. It's kind of a community effort to make sure there's chilled water around Phoenix. Phoenix is probably our hottest, biggest city.
and we
And
should
they
say
provide,
Phoenix, Maricopa County,
yeah,
year to year, they do a pretty um I know internally they probably have critiques over are they doing enough or is the data robust enough? But we know because of Maricopa County, because of Las Vegas, Clark County, Nevada, the hundreds of people per year dying from heat related illness. Right.
so what is kind of interesting in the case of Phoenix with this chilled water, like a community effort in that businesses step forward and say, okay, we'll put one of these chilled water uh, outlets on our building so that people can have access. They have actually have volunteers, Greg, whose job it is to check on these fountains. It's a relatively small task for a volunteer, but they've got people that volunteered to do that. Um, the other thing on that chart I show in Vancouver, British Columbia, where they've added misters. You can press a button and you'll get water misting, which will cool you down right away. And the uh, I noticed in Paris, they have these classic Wallace fountains that have been there for 150 years, I think it is, that were originally intended to provide clean water to anybody that needed it in Paris. Um, they've added misters to those in recognition of the fact that that helps with the heat. Uh, I don't know
So
if we,
shade, water, are those two components, would you say, of like a public health response?
yes.
Hmm.
And to, step it up one more, add on these water fountains, add misters
Yeah,
on
for
demand.
sure.
You don't have to run all the time. And then I point out that in the Denver Botanic Gardens today, they have solar powered atmospheric water harvesters. You can take, there's a device that looks like a solar panel. It is a solar panel, but it ends up producing water. It extracts the water out of the air and in such a way that it's potable water. Now, I'm told if you go there, I haven't seen this myself, but I read about it. If you go to the Denver Botanic Gardens, they use that water to water the plants as well as it provides drinking water for people who want to take a drink. And uh, think about that for a minute. This is a way you're totally off the grid. You're not using electricity. You're not using city water. It's pulling the water out of the air using solar power. And think about what that would mean to certain parts of town that don't have water fountains. They don't have enough water to water uh, landscaping and so on. I'm thinking about there's probably parks in certain parts of the city that could use equipment like this to not only provide a drinking fountain, but also water trees and other things to help green things up.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's some of these parks that are unusable for, 4 months of the year,
Yeah.
essentially, because of the heat, that is hitting those spots. But we've gotten kind of used to putting up shade structures, and whether it's
Yes.
like canvas sails or metal or whatever is they're using.
Yes.
But imagine, yeah, any one of those could essentially be a water collector, and mister. That's
All right. Well,
stepping it up.
beautiful segue to my next slide, which is shows what this would look like, where you have
Hmm.
these water generating solar panels creating a
Hmm.
shade structure
Hmm.
as well as providing water for
Hmm.
human use, as well as watering the nearby vegetation. So you're killing three birds with one stone here
Yeah, amazing.
in that case. Now, one of the things that um I realized was doesn't do any good to have water fountains all around if nobody knows where they are.
Hmm.
So one very simple idea is to have directional signage, water
Sure.
fountain,
Yeah.
uh, so that people
Yeah.
that are in a part of town they're not familiar with, or from out of town or whatever,
Hmm.
they could find these. And then nowadays we're so used to using apps and things. It turns out in Europe they have an app called Extrema, which more than one
Hmm.
city uses in Europe.
Hmm.
That tells you where, first of all, it tells you what the health risk is right where you are.
Hmm.
It tells you the location of water and of a cooling space, and it'll actually plot out the coolest path towards any destination, including the ones I just
Yeah.
mentioned. It also is handles emergency messages if you're in trouble,
Hmm.
or if the city feels the need to put out some sort of warning. It's on this app,
Yeah, I like those.
and
Sorry, go ahead.
it's multilingual.
Yeah. I
Now,
love.
no city in the U.S. right now uses this app,
Hmm.
and I don't know what it would take to do that, but there's a neat idea. I mean,
Hmm.
and as you know, practically everybody has mobile phones these days. Even
Hmm.
even folks that are homeless have
Hmm.
mobile phones because of a federal program. And to have this phone uh, tell you information related to the heat and how to deal with it would be I think, a great little project. I say little project, it could be a very significant project.
I'm guessing that probably Paris is maybe one of these cities using an app like this. I did look at Paris, I know a few years ago, and I'd have to go back to to reference get this exactly right, but some of the heat waves that hit Europe and Western Europe, uh, the suffering, I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of people expiring during in these heat waves because of the heat, where air conditioners are far less common, right?
Right.
Texas is something we are used to, and not certainly all families have artificial cooling or adequate cooling for our climate. But the body count there is partly related to like not having that infrastructure, right? So when they began, my understanding is when they began doing a concerted heat response, greenways, mature trees being planted, not little saplings, but through these major corridors where people were getting sick because of everything you've described here, the lack of green space, the density of the asphalt and concrete and all the rest. They were also thinking about, well, how can someone move through the city and not just jumping island to island, but have corridors, cooling
Yes.
corridors. So what you're pointing out here, this Extrema global app, showing people here's how you can move through the city and in a way that keeps temperature and health in mind.
Wow, you're setting up things for me in a great way. Yeah, part of my message is we need to think in terms of having, let's call them oases, uh,
Yeah.
cool spots,
Hmm.
uh, pocket parks, whatever they might be, and co cool corridors connecting them so that people can move around the city and stay healthy that way. And the thing about air conditioning, my next slide talks about where do we put the heat, and this is where
Right. To point out, air conditioning, artificial cooling is not a perfect solution. Like technical solutions often create new problems, right? And certainly, like, we had for a long time these, window units, and if you stand outside of those, they're pushing that heat back, like out, right? Outward. And they generate heat to operate, they're wasteful and all that. And we've since got two heat pumps that are much more efficient, but still not perfect. But yeah, sorry, but yeah, we just want to.
getting back to this first law of thermodynamics, where uh, a way of saying this is that heat is neither created or destroyed. It's like taking the wrapping off a package. You may cool your house, but the heat's still there. And air conditioners are famous for taking heat that's in a house or in a building and pumping it outside. Well, you're making it hotter outside. So, what are some things that we can do to actually get rid of the heat or transfer it somehow into something else? Incidentally, a solar panel, it's radiated by the sun, the light and the heat from the sun, and it converts about 15% of that energy into electricity. So it's doing its little job in trying to get some of the heat out of the system. Uh, but another one that I'm very interested in is geothermal. That's why I brought up the flood tunnel. And if you go down 30 feet in San Antonio, it's basically 70 degrees year round. And that if you could tie uh, that into let's say a house,
Hmm.
have something in the house. Like I envision a radiator like I used to have when I was a kid in the houses I lived in. They'd have a
Hmm.
radiator,
Hmm.
be warm in the winter, and would be, in this case, cool in the summer.
Hmm.
Uh, I think we need to be exploring some geothermal, either where you're taking the heat that we're feeling
Hmm.
and it's in the air. and you're putting it underground.
Hmm.
Okay, you're putting it someplace. You're not just
Hmm.
reflecting it.
Right.
Uh, that's the problem with the cool pavement is that
Hmm.
you have to think about where the heat is going. Well, it's not being absorbed by the pavement, but it's
Hmm.
not going away either. And if you're a pedestrian standing next to the street,
Yeah.
you could be hotter.
Yeah.
Uh, and you're trying to cool pavement or people.
Yeah.
Uh,
We looked at that too a couple of years
I
ago,
know
and I
you.
know you and I have spoken about this, and we went out and measured, or I measured the sidewalk heat, the untreated street, and the treated street surface, and definitely did seem that it was warmer beside the streets that had that cool treatment, and we have them now in our neighborhood, and we'll see. But we've got maybe 10 minutes. I hope that's a good. But so I'm going to
I think
let
I'm
you.
getting close to the end here.
Okay.
Uh, so think about where the heat's going.
Hmm.
Uh, the to me, the coolest thing that's, pardon the pun, that's going on right now is called this
I'm
passive,
celebrating that pun, Bill.
okay,
Thank you.
passive daytime radiative cooling. Uh, it is a paint, a film
Hmm.
that you can put on top of something, and it gathers up the heat and sends it at just the right part of the spectrum where it goes through our atmosphere out into deep space.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay.
And it can make that thing that you painted with it 18 degrees cooler than the surrounding temperature, the ambient temperature, without any electricity, without any water. It's just material science
Okay.
gathering up this heat and sending it at just the right.
What are
uh,
these materials? Where do I go to Lowe's? Where do I get a bucket of
well,
that?
I know if you go to the 3M website,
Okay.
uh, they sell the film at least, and they actually have they suggest, hey, this would be a good thing to put on a bus shelter.
Mm.
And in fact, in Tempe, Arizona, they're doing that. The
Hmm.
Arizona State University and 3M
Wow.
and the city of Tempe are all cooperating, and Arizona State's doing measurements and all that. But
Hmm.
they're actually using this material, and it's hard not to get excited about it. You talk about how to get rid of the heat.
That's
Um,
fascinating.
on my slide, I've got a picture I got from Singapore is getting all excited about this
Mm.
and trying to cool Singapore.
Wow.
Another thing you can do with the heat is turn it into water vapor.
Hmm.
Uh, I think I read that it takes a certain amount of energy to raise a gallon of water by 1 degree
Hmm.
Fahrenheit. Uh, if you were to evaporate that water, it would assume absorb 1,000 times
Mm.
that amount of heat. It's so that's something to do with it.
Mm.
And then you can also carry it away with like a cooling district. And so that's another way. That's another place to put the heat
Hmm.
is in a cooling district. And then I talk about two projects I like here in San Antonio. One is Cuisine Solutions down in the southern part of the city, where they've covered the parking lot with solar panels. The part that's not covered is pervious concrete, which is a lighter color to begin with. And
Hmm.
because it's pervious, it's cooler. They have a very bright white roof to the building itself.
Hmm.
Uh, and what we learned from the cool pavement is if you're going to be reflecting heat, have it above the
Right.
pedestrian level.
Right.
And then there's this cherished park, former Sunset Ridge Church of Christ parking lot that they've turned into a park. And this is taking uh, asphalt and turning it into green space, which
Hmm.
is, green space is what we need to make things cooler. And we don't, we hate asphalt makes things hotter.
Hmm.
So we either need to cover up that asphalt, or there's a program called Depave where they actually
Hmm.
uh, excuse me, get volunteers
Hmm.
to pull up pavement and
Take it
plant
out. Hmm.
plants. I was just reading about who was it? Kansas City
Hmm.
has a thing about, and I just started reading about it this morning. They got a program converting parking lots to green spaces.
Hmm.
So that's kind of it.
Hmm.
It's dangerously hot and getting hotter.
Hmm.
Uh, Lack of vegetation and uncovered asphalt are kind of our worst problems. Shade is not enough. You know, when it's 100 degrees, that's 100 degrees in the shade, and that's
Hmm.
dangerously hot. And you can take the heat and put it in the ground, or send it to deep space, or use it to create water vapor, or carry it away with a cooling district. And we've got some good projects in San Antonio. Even the city has been building solar canopies over parking lots on some
Hmm.
of their facilities. That's a good thing. And all of this, I think, will set us up to actually, we can actually begin a period of prosperity
Hmm.
if we were to get serious about adapting to this heat.
Hmm.
I was out at Saws on a tour the other day, and they were talking about how all these people that come to see Saws with their water recycling system. You know, we got the largest network in the United States, the
Hmm.
desalinization, the aquifer storage recharge system they have going. People come from around the United States and I guess the world to see this stuff.
Hmm.
Well, if we had some of this technology I've been talking about, people would come to
Hmm.
see it here in San Antonio. I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure. And so, and not to mention the health benefits that would come from that.
Hmm. And I appreciate that so much and the research you put into this. And I know you've had a lot of conversations. You're someone who meets a lot of people, knows a lot of people, and shares this information at, one-to-one as well as small groups. Um, some of this, is familiar because we've been working on these sorts of things at Deceleration um, and going back prior, and earlier before this became the full-time project as an organizer with Sierra Club. I know I worked with a coalition in San Antonio. Uh, COVID year one, we made a proposal to our former mayor, to invest in um, deeply invest in weatherization of homes, because there is a huge kind of like this feedback loop that starts when you start building like a job corps team to do the work into homes and the money that goes into, and all of that. And rather than accept that challenge, and now it's been a few more years. It was another kind of jobs program that got invested in that I think has been widely
Uh,
criticized and critiqued and never really lived up to its billing. So it's always a case of like lost years, lost opportunities. But I think what you're displaying here is even in the absence of, well, not just the absence of federal support, but in a new antagonistic universe, right? This regime kind of seeking to kind of crush clean energy or climate adaptation projects, local communities still have a tremendous amount of power to build up from, the grassroots, from local government, county government programs like you are presenting. So I'm wondering if in your conversations funding and new constellations of power are part of this conversation in terms of how we move these ideas forward, not just in San Antonio, but for folks anywhere to learn from and begin to adopt.
well, I think you're right, and it all boils down to the local community and to realize the importance of the vitality of the community depends on being able to survive this extreme heat. Uh, yes, it may take some money and uh, there are grants still available to help cities with water systems and so on, which we've been talking about. Incidentally, that's another thing. On the water, as you know, some homes don't have air conditioning, or if they have it, they can't afford to run it.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they can stay cool with is water. They can take a cold shower or get
Mhm.
climb into a bathtub at
Mhm.
home, whatever. Uh, so, water is almost the baseline.
Yeah.
We have to have the water, even beyond just drinking it, but it may be the way to cool it. My late
Mhm.
wife was a high school counselor at Brackenridge, and she would
Mhm.
tell me about there'd be students that were living in storage sheds, basically, and they didn't have any water.
Yeah.
They didn't have any air conditioning.
Yeah.
Uh, and that Tucson project where they looked at where they ought to have public water fountains, one of the criteria they used was uh, they wanted to have a water fountain within a half a mile of any school that had a homeless student in it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, and San Antonio, as you can appreciate, has a lot of homeless students in its public school
Mhm.
system. I
Mhm.
think we're second only to Dallas in that regard,
Mhm.
Texas anyway. And
Mhm.
this is about health. It's about equity, which I
Mhm.
know you're interested in, and I am
Mhm.
too. And there's it's going to just take some courage, I think,
Mhm.
to do what needs to be done to make sure that we can prosper. San Antonio was the first city anywhere to
Mhm.
have an air-conditioned transit bus.
Mhm.
We've had leadership in the past dealing with our warm temperatures here, and it's time to step up again and
Mhm.
provide leadership in this area, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, Bill. And I think about in these times in the political climate, the folks of Minneapolis are really showing us something in terms of in the midst of a war on empathy, right? We keep hearing from influencers, whether it's in the Christian nationalist or the anti-feminist women sphere, or from Stephen Miller or others, that empathy is the illness or the problem or whatever, and actually it is our salvation as we find we hold our communities sacred, we hold our relations sacred, and we refuse to surrender them to any kind of oppression, whether it's something that's a climate crisis or ice crisis. So I think there's a lot of motivation right now to be in solidarity together in community. And I think this is where a heat response will emerge. It's kind of like the entire climate struggle for so many decades. And as we close, just kind of like maybe a summary thought is so much of that work, it was largely kind of big, NGOs, wealthy, wider NGOs, political elites, and trying to cut deals, right? And how do we keep advancing, a capitalist, extractivist culture, um, and take care of our carbon, right? And it just didn't work politically. It didn't motivate. It didn't get the political energy to respond to the enormity of the crisis. And what I think a lot of those groups found was we need to go into the communities and find the people that are most impacted, make sure that they understand how the connections between energy decisions, policy making, state decisions, and their own power. And then when that started to hook up, then I think we began to see a real climate movement in the United States anyway. That's really under stress right now, I think, kind of like in shock. But I think through solidarity work in so many other areas. And one of the reasons Deceleration is paying a lot of attention to what's happening in human rights and the pro-democracy struggle, is that's the energy. It's the same force that that not only is the answer to everything you're describing here, our own survival, but to a better life together. So your work is phenomenal, and the research you put into it, and I know the heart and the intentionality that you bring to it is a sacred mission, I feel like, that you've carried for many decades.
Thank you. Greg, I do feel like I may be the right person at the right time in the right place
Hmm.
to talk about this because of my experience, because of my, college training, and so on, and a lot of there's a lot of folks trying to work on this heat issue without ever having taken a course in thermodynamics, for example. So they're going to come up with things that really, in the big picture, are not the right thing to do.
Hmm. Some things seem obvious, don't produce returns. Some things should be motivating to all of us. People should not be dying on the street. I know when we wrote about, one of our neighbors here, Mr. Garcia, who died underneath the highway down the street. The year before that was unhoused during the winter storm Uri that almost collapsed the state grid, lost both of his feet and part of one leg. The summer when he died, his campmate, who I talked with after he had passed, said, "Oh yeah, it was hot. He used to just lay down here and pass out in the dirt, and eventually, he didn't wake up." His campmate said that same summer, it was I think is still our hottest summer on record a couple of years back,
Right.
for San Antonio. Um, Described going to the store, which was, mile and a half away to get supplies and things like that. And by the time he was almost back, passing out on the street twice from heat stroke, ambulance comes to pick him up, but he's on that pavement, what you were describing, the
Oh,
burning skin and all the rest. So, you know, yeah, I think the campaign to count heat mortality, those who are dying, is really a campaign to not only just stand on conviction that no one should be dying from heat in the city, but also if we pay attention, then we can begin to create solutions. If you don't count it, someone in city planning, circles once told me it doesn't exist for policymakers. If it's not quantifiable, then we can't respond to it. So anyway, I think that's a large part what that campaign's about, and I think your part in all of this is going to be really critical.
well, thanks you. I hope we start seeing some changes. And part of it is with your help providing information to people. A lot of people, like I said, yeah, it's Texas, it's summer, of course it's hot. If that's
Mhm.
their stuff, that's where
Right,
they are knowledge wise.
right.
That's not going to be enough to make some changes.
Thank you for joining us for this Deceleration podcast. Check us out online, deceleration.news. Be sure to subscribe to our growing roster of newsletters. Find us on social media. Log in, become a member. Let us know what you want us to cover next. Take care.